Great. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our open house. This is a hybrid open house on the Commonwealth Wind project. This open house is taking place virtually via Zoom and here at the Oxford Village Library. So I'll just start, as always, by thanking the folks here at the Oxford Village Library for hosting us. They've been hosting us here for open houses since November of 2022. So thank everyone downstairs for their partnership there. And we will get started. So just to start, my name is Rachel Martin. I'm on the external affairs team for Avangrid, which is the company that owns the Commonwealth Wind project, and several others here in Barnstable. So just some quick housekeeping. We will run through, we don't have a specific topic tonight. We don't, over the course of the last year or so, we've had different colleagues and consultants come and give kind of deep dive presentations on different topics. We don't have one of those tonight, so it'll be a pretty quick presentation, and then we'll dive into Q&A. I would love, just from the room, if it's anyone's first time here tonight coming to one of our open houses. Okay, great. Quite a few. Great, so typically how we run these is we'll kind of do a quick overview of the project, and then we've had these different kind of deep dive presentations from some of my colleagues, and then we'll go into Q&A. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. So for folks on Zoom, at any point, you can type a Q&A into the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or you can raise your hand, and my colleague Pat Johnson is on Zoom, and we'll be able to read those off once we get into Q&A. Let me see if I can just get rid of this guy. So like I said, agenda tonight, we have a quick update on the Vineyard Wind 1 project, which is currently under construction. And I'll go from there. So tonight with us, we have Pat Johnson, who's our external affairs manager on Zoom. Myself, again, Rachel Martin here in the room. We also have Ken Fitzgerald, who is the senior principal and engineer at Stantec, who's one of our consultants. And we were going to have Ken Kimmel in the room with us tonight, but as I do not see him, I think he might have gotten a little bit delayed. So maybe we'll hear from him soon, or he may be joining virtually. So just to give a little background, since we have some new folks in the room. So I'll start with Avangrid. So Avangrid is a publicly traded company. We have our main offices based in Orange, Connecticut, and we have our offshore wind offices based in Boston, Massachusetts. That's where I work out of. And Avangrid owns, and we don't have the map here, but I can send it out to folks when I send out this deck to anyone who wants it. Avangrid is a big player in the renewable sector here in the United States. We do solar, we do onshore wind, as well as offshore wind. So up here on the screen is an overview of our current offshore wind projects. So just a little give a scope of some of the names you may have been hearing in the news or in other things. We'll just give kind of a quick rundown. So Vineyard Wind 1 is a project that folks will have been probably hearing about in the news, the latest and the longest. So the area that we're looking at on this map is an area about 20 miles south of Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket. So all of these shapes that you're seeing here on the screen, these are all lease areas for offshore wind farms. These lease areas were developed by an organization at the federal level called the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM. So all of these shapes are areas that the federal government has leased for offshore wind areas to developers like Avangrid. So Avangrid has a lease space. They have 3 lease spaces that they're working out of right now, which are these 3 colored shapes. So this green shape, which is furthest north. So again, this area is generally like 20 over miles from Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. That shape is where the turbines for the Vineyard Wind 1 project will go. So that project is currently under construction. That project is a 50% partnership, so half owned by Avangrid, half owned by another company called Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, or CIP. So that project is under construction, and I'll show some pictures later, but they actually have just announced the project is going to be producing first power by the end of this year. So that's very, very exciting. That will be the first power from that project flowing into homes and businesses. The second shape, the orange shape, is where the offshore wind turbines will be for the Park City Wind project. The Park City Wind project is 100% owned by Avangrid. It is currently in permitting and development, and it's roughly the same size, about an 800 megawatt project. And then this blue shape down at the bottom is what we're talking about tonight, the Commonwealth Wind project. So that project is also in permitting and development, is 100% owned by Avangrid, and is a little bigger in size. It's roughly a 1,200 megawatt project. And then not shown on screen because it's down off the coast of the Carolinas. Avangrid also owns a lease area for the Kitty Hawk Wind project, which is a much larger project. And that's currently also in permitting and development. So this is just a little bit of a kind of table setting and just like a map exercise to show you some of the projects and names you may have been hearing about. Yep.
Does Avangrid have a mission statement that you could read us?
Not off the top of my head, but I could absolutely run it for you, yes. We are,
Maybe you could explain, as a basic question, why is a Spanish company interested in producing and putting up a wind farm in Massachusetts?
yeah, so Avangrid is owned by a company called Iberdrola. Iberdrola is an energy company that's based in Europe. It has projects all over the world. It has projects in Asia, in Europe, in South America, and in North America. So Avangrid, as a subset of that, has a renewable energy arm that does energy projects all over the United States and offshore wind.
Why? I know they're all over the world, but why do they want to do it here in Massachusetts?
Well, offshore wind is actually, off the coast of Massachusetts is one of the best places to do offshore wind. We have some of the strongest and most consistent winds here, as well as having more shallow areas for water, which is a great combination for offshore wind. So that area has been called like the Saudi Arabia of wind.
We know all that, but you're not answering the question. Why do they want to?
Oh, the company's a developer. We're building projects to sell power to utility companies.
Well, you're not answering, but.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
If you're pulling out what was to have been Connecticut's biggest offshore wind project, Park City, saying inflation and other adverse economic factors that have hit the offshore industry made the project unfinanceable, why is it financeable here in Massachusetts?
Yeah, no, so I can address that. So, Park City Wind had what's called a PPA or a power purchase agreement with the state of Connecticut. Commonwealth Wind had a PPA or power purchase agreement with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So what that was is an agreement to sell power to that state and to the utilities within that state. So Park City Wind had a power purchase agreement with the state of Connecticut that we terminated after negotiations with the state of Connecticut. So what both Park City Wind and Commonwealth in now, the stage we're at, is there's a multi-state bid that's been put out by Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island to seek developers putting forth proposals to sell power. So Avangrid will be submitting proposals for both Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind back into that RFP process. Those proposals are due in January and decisions are expected by June. So the Park City Wind project does not have a power purchase agreement to sell power to the state of Connecticut. And so we will be submitting bids into a multi-state RFP this coming
And how
January.
would that impact the original Park City wind?
The original project
Yeah, here.
here. So the design of the project, the landing at Craigville Beach is still the same, landing at the substation, all of that is consistent.
But the price will maybe be different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will be higher probably, right?
Yeah, it'll be a new price.
Rachel, are those drawings to scale relative to the size of the islands?
Yes, I believe so.
I understand that any source of power that's generated from fossil fuel, wind, solar, anything, all just basically goes on the grid and just goes wherever it goes. And every state or every utility provider has to purchase power. So my question is, do the ratepayers in Massachusetts see any reduction in the power costs, our power costs for connections from this project? Because Massachusetts is bearing the brunt of any environmental impact, potential losses. Do we get what's in it for us, basically?
Yeah, great question. So you are correct, and I think that's a really great point to clarify. So all of the New England states get their power when you plug in an appliance, when you flip a switch, the electricity that's coming to your home or business is coming from the ISO New England grid. So it doesn't matter where you live in the region that the grid covers, and it covers most New England states. That's where your power is coming from. And you're right, that pie is made up of all the sources of electricity we could get, whether that's coming from offshore wind or solar or onshore wind or fossil fuels. So what these projects do and what offshore wind as an industry will do is make that pie much, much greater. And so the benefits for that is that there is a much stronger reliability when you can pull power from a much more stably priced source like offshore wind. And you're not leaning on natural gas prices that can fluctuate really highly. You're not leaning on peaker plants, like our canal plant. I don't know if folks remember the cold snap, in Christmas Eve, 2022 now, I think. You know, when you have cold snaps and peaker plants have to be turned on, those electricity prices can skyrocket. So when you have a much bigger piece of the pie and a much bigger piece of that pie is more stably priced, you get a lot of reliability benefits from there.
But will anyone in Massachusetts actually see a reduction in the cost of electricity?
No way.
Based on
These would
the
be the other customers.
upcoming power production is gonna be coming online soon on one of these you just said. Who benefits from that? Who is benefiting from that coming online?
Well, I would say a great number of people in a whole variety. I would say,
But anybody
in,
here?
in Barnstable,
Yes.
yes. The power that is coming into Cape Cod will be clean energy.
But
is it
how many homes on Cape Cod are gonna be electrified by this?
Well, speaking to the kind of that like plugging into the grid, these projects will create more electricity than is demanded on Cape Cod. So as a term of where electricity flows the fastest, all the homes and businesses on Cape Cod will be powered by these projects. It does flow into the grid generally, but it's plugging in at the West Barnstable Eversource station in West Barnstable. So that power will be flowing to Cape Codders first.
But you not haven't answered my question as to whether, I know where the power just goes into the grid. It's like plugging 10 garden hoses into one outlet, it goes wherever it goes. But is the person holding hose A getting a
A
better
cheaper
rate?
price.
Oh, is the person holding hose A getting a better rate than the
Yeah.
person holding hose G? I think your answer is probably no.
Yeah, Pat, do you want to speak a little bit to the delivery costs and some of the other points of this question here?
Certainly, yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Pat Johnson, Rachel's colleague. I'm sorry I'm remote this evening. But to your question, sir, so for the Vineyard Wind project, first of all, that is contracted with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the utility companies in Massachusetts selling power to Eversource, National Grid, and Fitchburg Gas and Electric, Unitil. So that's where power's going and going to be plugging into the electric grid in Barnstable, as Rachel described. These other two projects, Park City Wind, the project landing at Craigville Beach, and the project we're discussing tonight, Commonwealth Wind, proposed to land under Douse's Beach, at this point do not have clarity on which state or which utility companies they have contracts with. We, as Rachel said, plan to bid into an RFP that's going to happen next year to secure new contracts for these projects. And at that point, when those results come out, we have clarity on who we are contracted to sell the power to. But as Rachel said, you need power in all parts of the New England grid, and this power will be focused on and will first be used by electricity consumers, residential and commercial, on Cape Cod and the islands, before excess power is then sent over the canal to the rest of the electric grid.
I think there's another part of that too, because the utilities, your bill is made up of a transmission charge and a generation charge. And what the utilities did when solar came out is they redid that so that more money is going towards, from your bill. You're getting more, you charge more by the utility for transmission now than you were before. So generation is one charge, which is what the wind farm is gonna be doing. Transmission is another charge that makes up your entire bill, and now the transmission charge is higher. So that's more of a function of the utilities.
That's correct, Larry. And the, as you said, if you're on Eversource or if you're on Cape Light Compact, it's the same for those of you. Some of you might have Eversource standard service, some of you might be on Cape Light Compact, but there are two sides of the bill, as Larry described. In this focus, this is the actual energy costs, and the prices of these projects will contribute to what you're actually paying per kilowatt hour for electricity you consume in your home, or for those of you who own businesses at your business. And then separately, Eversource and or Cape Light Compact charge you for the actual delivery and transmission of the electricity to reach your home or your business. So there's, as you said, two sides of the bill. This is going to focus on the energy costs side of the bill.
When Vineyard Wind comes online, what's the, under the PPA, what are the charges?
I think that's Craig, if that's you, or Councilor Tamish, if I recognize your voice. I believe that Vineyard Wind is about 8.2 cents per kilowatt hour, is my understanding.
Does Eversource then add a surcharge or something to it? Because we're not gonna be seeing an 8-cent charge for power on our bill for transmission, only for generation, right?
It's my understanding, Craig, that you can't, Eversource and other utilities, that's a direct pass-through cost, what they pay for electricity. What then they charge the consumer, they can't upcharge that. Where they upcharge is on the transmission delivery other side of your bill. But I don't believe they do add to that cost, that they're not allowed to under Massachusetts state law.
Folks now, this is our Chief Development Officer, Ken Kimmel, is joining us, for folks on Zoom. All right, so just, kind of another map, another graphic to look at for this project. So like I mentioned, this is, roughly a 1,200 megawatt project. It's again at the bottom of this federal lease area. So this orange line would show, how we're connecting the wind turbines in this project through submarine cables to its landing, which is proposed at Dowses Beach, and then connecting up to the existing West Barnstable Eversource substation. Again, this project is 100% owned by Avangrid. Where those turbines will be is about 40 miles plus from Barnstable. And again, we're connecting into that point about the ISO New England grid at the Eversource West Barnstable station. And we are moving through permitting at the federal, local, and regional level. And so just a little bit more about what 1,200 megawatts looks like. So 1,200 megawatts is enough clean renewable energy to offset 2.35 million US tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year, which is the equivalent of about taking 460,000 gas fossil fuel powered cars off the road. And additionally, this is enough energy to power roughly 700,000 homes and businesses here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. In addition, there are a number of both construction, which are shorter term, and also long-term jobs created through the creations of these projects, and also just the offset of this industry here in the United States. And specifically in Barnstable, since we're here in Barnstable tonight, speaking about the pieces of this project that take place within the bounds of Barnstable, this is 3 cables. So each of those submarine cables can carry, there'll be 3 submarine cables for this project, taking the power from those wind turbines to land at Dowses Beach. Approximately 6.7 miles of underground utility infrastructure running from the landfall site, which is underneath the paved parking lot at Dowses Beach, to our proposed substation. That substation will be located off of Oak Street, north of Route 6. And then another about half a mile of underground utility infrastructure to connect that new substation to the existing West Barnstable substation, the Eversource substation we've been discussing, and upgrades at that West Barnstable substation at Oak Street to facilitate our interconnection there. So these are the pieces that kind of cross through water and also then land in Barnstable for the Commonwealth Wind project.
Rachel, question?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Do you know of any, have you seriously considered alternatives to landing 1,200 megawatt under Dowses Beach and through the streets of a village of Oxfordville?
Yeah, so we've discussed our alternatives at a couple different meetings, so I'm happy to run through some basics tonight, and maybe if I can, we might have a map graphic later on that comes up. So looking at alternatives, we looked at a variety of other alternatives, but what's important is where we are able to connect into the grid. And so Avangrid has what's called queue position at the West Barnstable substation, which means our company currently has the right, which had to be obtained, and we don't have those rights everywhere. We have the right to plug our power into that substation. So a lot of folks bring up alternatives like other industrial areas or other places. Our company doesn't currently have the ability to connect our power into those places. So then looking at, areas to plug in around, towards that West Barnstable substation, we absolutely did. And we can go through, and again, I think I have a map up a little later on looking at them, but what is needed to land our cables through the process we're landing them in, which is called horizontal directional drilling, or HDD, which is the way that we are able to minimize disruption to our landing sites. we need certain depths of water, we need certain environments where we can do that. So absolutely alternatives were looked
But the
at.
original project that didn't, the original site requested in Falmouth, why, did you have a station near there too?
Yeah, that I know a little bit less about.
The Vineyard Wind One project, which is of course now built at Covell's Beach, did request a landing at Yarmouth originally. And I think before our time, a decision was made to go to Barnstable, and I don't actually know the reason for that. Yarmouth is not available to us to get to that Barnstable station at this point for a number of reasons, including the fact that it would require us to crisscross over the Vineyard Wind One, the one that's landing at Covell's Beach, to get to the West Barnstable substation. So we looked at landings that are southwest of Covell's Beach, because that's the Vineyard One landing. So that is really the universe of options to us. And as Rachel said, Dowses Beach was, after Craigville Beach, which is the Park City Wind One, the alternative that met all of the criteria.
So in your earlier, before this slide, you made a comment about the cables coming onshore and this one in particular at Dowses, and you said connecting to the existing substation at Oak Street, but on this next slide that you have up,
Yeah,
you're saying, oh, could you put that other one up?
yeah, yes.
So here you say a proposed substation located on north of Route 6 off Oak Street. So that is a second substation on top of what's already there and on top of the substation that you want to build on Shoot Flying Hill Road. So you're building a substation on Shoot Flying Hill Road. You've upgraded the substation on Oak Street, and now you're going to build another substation on Oak Street. And how large is that substation? Because we know that the other one on Shoot Flying Hill Road is 6, 8, 9 acres. So
Yep.
what is the acreage and size of this one?
So let me clarify the first point, and then I don't have the stats in my head as well, but Pat, maybe you could answer on size. So the interconnection point, so this is where we're plugging into the grid. So my apologies to not be more clear on that. Our interconnection point is at the existing West Barnstable substation. That's what I mentioned here. So the power has to be stepped up and down. So the amount that is running through different cables has to be changed in order to, facilitate efficiency and then to allow it to run through distribution. So the lines you see, power lines over your head. So that second substation, so for each project, we're proposing a substation to alter that power so it can enter the grid and then connecting into that existing substation. So you're correct there.
So
We're
Excuse
talking
me, the
about,
substation that is currently on Independence Drive. If I use that as a visual of the size of
Vineyard
that,
Wind ones.
if I envision the size of that, is what is also being built on Shoot Flying Hill Road and on Oak Street in a residential neighborhood?
Yes.
yeah, so just my follow-up to that point was 3 substations we're up to now, and how many gallons were determined were gonna be of this, heat dissipating concoction? And will that be at each one of those?
The dialect,
Potentially damaging, that could potentially damage that aquifer. So we got 3 stations, not just one now.
3 stations, each with the state-of-the-art containment mechanism that the town of Barnstable and their independent engineer insisted that we use, which we are gonna use. So
How many
each one of
gallons?
How
those.
many gallons?
Off the top of your head.
110% is what you have in print, right?
110% plus 30-inch rainfall.
How many gallons?
Sorry.
How many gallons?
Off the top of my head, I don't know the gallons. Sorry. Maybe Pat or Rachel know the gallons for Vineyard.
That's
on
for
Park City.
Park City.
Yeah.
25 is for Park City.
Can I ask a related question here? So I've heard there are 30 proposed additional wind farms around, let's just call it Cape Cod, and the federal waters around Cape Cod. So if you build this project and do these substations and make the interconnection points, is this the initial requirement to then permit 30 more wind farms? Turning basically the high tension lines that run from the canal down to the old Morant station, which did request to be an interconnection point. and it was rejected because of Power Grid's expenses. So if this goes through, will the other 30 plants, proposed wind farms, be able to then connect to this? Or is Yarmouth, Dennis, and every other place along our transmission lines going to be subject to more substations?
Our understanding of Eversource and the grid is they're doing upgrades to accommodate the capacity that we're putting in, and no more than that. So my understanding is that there would not be grid capacity for additional wind farms to connect into the towns you're talking about.
Correct, but this is like the salesman getting his foot stuck in the door. Well, you open the door by allowing this, and then every other project says, well, we already set a precedent by allowing these 3 substations in Park City. Now we have 27 more projects in the pipe that are gonna come in and wanna tie in.
So.
But again, I think the key point is the one that Rachel started with. There was capacity at the West Barnstable substation, and we were able to get this queue right to connect there. Once we've done that, those queue rights have been used entirely, and there is no additional capacity to connect. So I guess I can't make you a guarantee about the future. What I can say is we're using up the available capacity on the Cape for offshore wind with our 2 projects.
As it stands right now.
Yeah, but it would take a major upgrade of the entire electric system.
But you're doing that right now.
No, we're doing upgrades, but they are not of the nature that would be needed to take 30 more projects. I just don't think that's at this point realistic. But those would be other companies making other proposals. There would be public proceedings about that, and there'd be a question about whether, you know, the Cape has the capacity to take additional wind farms other than ours.
Well, currently, we don't have the capacity to take them because we're having to add 3 substations.
Those are substations that we're building. I'm talking about the grid itself that we're connecting into. And those substations, as Rachel said, are being done to condition the power so that it's the correct voltage to connect to the grid. What I'm saying is, my understanding of this is the grid on Cape Cod is tapped out once these 2 projects connect, and there is no additional capacity at West Barnstable to take these projects.
Currently.
Okay, yeah, currently, but that's an important
Question,
important note.
Yeah. I just sit here in total amazement, Ken, again. You know real well what the capacity is and what's going on. Today, there was a federal 106 historic meeting that involved all the stakeholders from the vineyard, the tribes, town of Barnstable, to some a very small extent. In those slides, which in your phone presentation, your next slide, we show a photograph of your presentation and the proposed location of the 3rd transformer substation that you put under agreement with a lease option on the land or a purchase option of the land years ago. You've not been disclosing this. You come in piece by piece by piece. If we take the capacity of the Park City wind transformer that now Friday night we disclosed was 125,000 gallons. We've asked at this meeting for over 6 months, a year. I asked you guys at Cape Cod Commission hearings over the summer. You've asked left and right and nobody ever knows. Patrick's online again. Pat, I hope you're feeling better. But 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, at the Centerville Public Library, Pat said there was only estimated 55,000 gallons of Park City Wind's transformer at the edge of Lake Waquaket. We find out Friday night after business hours that you're now disclosing 125,000 gallons. If we take the scale of that, and we take that 125,000 gallons, then we take what you're doing to the Oak Street transformer substation and you're tripling the amount of oil that's in there and bringing that up to about 100,000 gallons also. Then we find out about your 3rd location, which you've got almost 28 acres tied up at the fire tower on the side of Route 6. If you look at the maps that you disclose in your federal side of the documents, which you're required to do, and unfortunately, the state's not making you do it on this side of the equation yet. You look at the scale of that substation and that transformer substation, it's gonna be going on the hill at the fire tower, the mid-cape. That has gotta be, if you use the scale of Park City's Knights Inn scale, you gotta be looking at 200,000 gallons of oil in that transformer substation. Why else would you get 28 acres of land up there? That's the same aquifer, it's the same area that leads to our wells. If you combine those three projects, we are probably realistically looking at about 400,000 gallons of oil you're introducing to our well fields that didn't exist until this project. Where I live in West Barnstable, everybody's on private wells. If you pollute those water sources, the water commissioners that can control the testing of water and on the well system, the water systems that we have, they have no way of blocking that. You keep telling us you don't have a design for these projects. Today at your federal historic hearing, people were asking, you're trying to get a historic approval done, and you haven't even submitted what you plan on building up on the top of that hill. It appears to be about 4 times the size of the transformer substations in Independence Park. You must have a design for that substation if you're talking about bringing it up to the grid. You're gonna tell us you don't have designs. You've taken it this far over 3 years. You've had the land tied up for 2 years. And you're trying to convince us again that you don't have a design for this. It's like you expect us to fall this again like we did at the EFSB hearing.
So Cliff, there's a couple of things you've said that just aren't true, so I'm gonna take a
Well, we
minute.
don't know it's true
Hold
yet,
on,
do we,
hold on,
Ken?
hold on. First of all, this 125,000 gallons is not a new number. If you look at our environmental impact reports for Park
Which
City,
one, Kat?
Which one?
Which environmental impact statement? You didn't provide it to the Cape Cod Commission.
it's
You
in
didn't
the,
provide it to Cape Cod
you
Conservation.
know what, Cliff, I patiently listened to you and I didn't interrupt you. I'm gonna ask you for the same courtesy.
Okay,
The
which one?
okay. The 125,000 gallon number is in the response to comments for the draft environmental impact report. It's in there. That
Yeah.
number's in there. Anyone has access to it and could see it. It was not hidden. It was no
How
secret.
long ago was that created?
The draft environmental impact report, I would say 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
How many hearings have you and Patrick participated at in front of us, Cape Cod Commission, the town, have been asked that exact question, and now all of a sudden it's readily available?
It has been readily available.
Then why didn't you disclose it to us when we asked you it over the last, what, 30 meetings?
No one knew.
Over the last 2 years, you never disclosed it. You didn't disclose it at Cape Cod Commission either.
Well, again, I haven't been to every one of these meetings. I can
You've
say.
been online. You were online at the Centerville Library meeting.
I can say that that number has never been hidden. It's been out in public view. It
It's
is,
undisclosed.
Couldn't answer it at the Cape Cod,
We're not fools,
Community
Ken.
College. Nobody knew at Cape
That's
Cod
right.
Community College.
That's
Nobody
Cape
knew.
Cod
No
Community
matter what,
College.
it's still 125,000.
Undisclosed.
Right. Who might?
That's the number. But
If you do it, why didn't you tell us?
I'm
I've
not,
been asked it by me in person.
you have not asked me personally how many gallons.
Patrick, you're online. How many times have I asked for the oil?
I'm happy to, first of all, thanks for your comments, Cliff. Still on the mend, but you asked me, I do not remember you asking that at the Cape Cod Commission hearing. You asked me that at the last in-person meeting we had in Centerville. And then you asked me for that several days after. I sent you a drawing of the substation, which had the amount of gallons per 400 megawatt unit. I personally didn't see the full 125K number as Ken described this on page 488 of the draft environmental impact report, but it is in that report. And now everyone here knows about it. It's in the EFSB filing, and as Secretary Tepper said at the hearing on Monday, it was in the draft environmental impact report, clear as day. So the good thing is now you and everyone has access to that information.
Page 488, that's clear as day? That's very, to me, like the cave.
There was no, look, there was no effort to underestimate the amount of dielectric fluid. The most important thing about the dielectric fluid is, as I've said before, the town has required us to put in a containment system that goes way beyond what other substations in Cape Cod and elsewhere have. And that containment will be required for the entire gallonage, not just for 60,000, but for the entire 125,000 gallons. And we have, that has been designed, that's in the record. That is a condition of our approval from the siting board, and it's in our host community agreement with the town. So the town has the right to separately enforce that containment mechanism. Those are the facts.
The fact is, at the Cape Cod Community College EFSB hearing on November 14th, the gentleman that runs the Eversource Construction Division for the substations was asked specifically, what happens in the event of a fire or explosion? We were told in front of an entire stadium of people that the standard procedure is to ask the local fire departments to stand down, let it burn. And in addition to that, the design and the host agreement does not adequately cover fire or explosions. And in addition to that, why won't you allow the mapping of the sole source aquifer and what would happen on a worst spill case scenario? What direction that would go, how many wells it would close, the same way that the federal government required you to do it offshore in your 179-page report that shows those transformers hit our shoreline in 10 hours. Why wouldn't you do the same courtesy to the people of Barnstable and where the mapping of those wells would go?
Again, the third substation, which by the way is not going to be 28 acres, it's going to be more like 10 acres, but we bought 28 acres as a
Tied up
buffer.
a lot of land.
Well, but a lot of that land is going to be tied up, so to speak, as a buffer to the substation and to provide open space mitigation, which we're required to do. So it's not going to be a 28-acre substation, it's about 10 acres. That's going to be designed to the exact same standards that the town has insisted for the other two substations.
Those aren't good enough.
Well, that's your opinion. That is not the opinion of the Cape Cod Commission, the Energy Facility Siting Board, or the town's independent expert.
Cape Cod Commission's own document states that you hadn't disclosed the design of the substation during their process, and they were leaning to the town's host agreement. I have another question on the 106 hearing. You've identified a second backup transformer site in Marston's Mills. Where is that located, and what's the purpose of that on Old Falmouth Road?
That's another possible option.
Yeah, but you're not looking for any more transformer substations.
We're not gonna build two substations, if that's what I'm thinking, no.
Well, you are building
When
two,
we-
because
when
you're
we got
building
talk-
one on Shift Line and you're building one
Sorry, we're
on.
not gonna build two substations for Commonwealth Wind. So that other property you're talking about is a backup
Yeah. When are you
location.
gonna talk to the town about that and talk to the people about that?
If we make a decision to go to that site, we absolutely will go through that.
How many other properties you got under agreement that nobody knows about?
I'm not for substations. I'm not aware of any.
Do you have a building
Can I ask
permit
No,
or any of it?
a building permit, no.
a-
That comes further down.
It's interesting, an operating question, what is the status of the landfall at Dowses Beach?
The status in terms of what?
You being allowed to land,
We have not gotten permits to do that. We're going through the permitting process.
You've talked about the oil that everyone's very concerned about, and so on about it getting into our aquifer. But what we're not talking about is the heat of these cables are snapping right through the well fields that are protected and going up and sitting above our aquifer. And the heat of those cables is going to increase the temperature of our water, and it's gonna increase the bacteria count. And that's a fact that you're not facing, and you have given us no scientific evidence that it doesn't do it, period.
So,
Ken along?
yeah, we've presented, I believe, on temperature and underground utility infrastructure temperature with accordance to heat at a prior meeting, so I can definitely pull that and send it to you, but I do believe we also have Ken Fitzgerald from Stantec who gave that presentation on the line. Ken, I don't know if you want to give a kind of a
And
brief.
what is this expert? Because I have my own scientific expert,
Yeah, so,
and I want to see the report in writing,
yeah,
and not what you just did in the lab that you made up.
so Ken, I don't know if you want to give a little background on your qualifications as well, and maybe a little review of what we've discussed at an earlier meeting on the heat.
Yeah, sure, Rachel. Could you hear me okay?
Yes.
Having a technical difficulty here. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, I'm having trouble on my camera, but I'll speak to it. So we are relatively early in the design process. We have a route established. The design work is progressing. And as part of the next steps, we're doing a lot of the analytical work. And the analytical work looks at precisely the types of issues that the lady had brought up, you know, the heat propagation that comes out of the duct bank. And it's being looked at in two different fashions. Number one, it's looking at it from the perspective of the interfacing utilities. So whether or not that will be the water pipe that shares the same streets as the Commonwealth wind duct bank, the sewer piping, natural gas piping, you know, many of those are coordinated. Actually, all of those are coordinated with the owning disciplines. In the same manner, the aquifer will be looked at soon with detailed, what they call CFD, computational fluid dynamic modeling. So that will run cases that will identify the heat propagation that goes down. The aquifers, I think in much of the Commonwealth wind duct bank route, it's about 22 feet below grade. If memory serves, maybe it's a little bit more than that. So the analytical work is just getting going now, and certainly like everything else, once the details are worked out and results are available, I would only assume that Avangrid would share that with the public and present it. So that work is underway. We're concerned about the same things you are, the aquifer, protection of the aquifer, both in terms of the propagation of preventing the propagation rather of dielectric fluid. As well as thermal issues. Let me be finished, please. Thermal issues are something that are vitally important to the design team.
You had a follow-up, which is a good question. Why should we get any permits until we've done those studies?
Not presented any.
Yeah.
No.
The answer is we won't get the permits until we presented that.
And you won't get the fact, and you won't do it because you've never done in the field
No.
studies.
Hold on a
Just
minute.
made up in a lab.
Hold on a minute.
The gentleman who was just speaking is hired by who to do those studies?
Avangrid. But all of
My
those,
own scientist,
okay,
Okay, and he's, I think, an expert. He's Dr. Richard Bondrak from
so,
Goddard Space Center in NASA, and he's my brother-in-law, and I run everything by him.
good. So
And the facts of the matter is you don't have any studies, and he's looked for them.
we're gonna give you this report when it's done, and I hope that you will provide it to your
Okay.
expert and have that person take a look, and we won't get our permits to go forward until that issue and others like it are addressed.
Has the state or the town required any independent engineering and scientific evidence? Because I've been to a number of these meetings and everybody listening to them online and from the Boston just a few days ago, it always seems to be the proponents, engineers, that have all these fairy tale stories. And as an engineer myself, mechanical granted, I can poke holes in a lot of these. I'm not an expert. There's a lot of common sense that seems to be overlooked.
Well, I'll let
By the
Pat
experts.
address some of the ongoing ones, but I again want to say this containment mechanism for the substation dielectric fluid came from the town of Barnstable's independent expert. It was what they insisted upon that we agreed to do. So that was an example of an independent expert looking at an issue that Mark Ellis has said publicly was a key issue for the town as it went through the process. But Pat, I think you may be able to amplify that a little bit.
Sure, I think what you might be referring to, Ken, I know there's possibility, we've had conversations with Chief Wynn in the Com Fire District about interest that Com Fire has in doing their own independent study and analysis. So, hopefully that'll materialize sometime next year and be a independent entity through the comm district, separate from Avangrid, that hopefully would help answer some of these questions, or for folks who want an independent analysis that hopefully will materialize through CommFire.
Since it looks like we've moved into Q&A, I can show the construction photos of Vineyard Wind, but it seems like probably better use of our time here. I don't know, Pat, if there was anyone, we want to take a question from our online folks before we move on.
Yeah, certainly. So Bob Schulte's raised his hand. So Bob, I'm going to move you to the, you're now here. So if you just want to unmute Bob, and feel free to go ahead.
And then we'll come back to the room.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment regarding the dielectric fluids, and I'll say the lack of forthrightness. I have had a career of over 25 years looking at documents similar to the DEIR that was filed, and much to my surprise, after the EFSB hearing, I reviewed them again. The draft environmental impact report, which was about 1,200 pages, and was surprised to find, yes, the reference to 125,000 gallons of dielectric fluid. But I'll point out again, that was on about page 500 of a 1,200-page draft document. That reference was not even placed in there by the company as part of the technical, but it was a response to the Cape Cod Commission question. So it was buried in an attachment, and that reference was subsequently removed and does not appear in the final environmental impact report. And it's just shocking for the company to expect the public, you would think, if anything, we would read the final environmental impact report, and that reference to the amount of dielectric fluid was removed. Yet, as Cliff pointed out, I have been at most of the presentations, either in person or watching on Zoom, and I've heard numerous citizens ask for the amount of dielectric fluids. And if it was supposedly in that document and you guys knew it, it's unfathomable that nobody could respond to those questions from the public. So I just point out to those present, it's just another example of kind of the disingenuousness and less than forthrightness that the company showed when people have asked questions. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else on Zoom, if you want to raise your hand or put anything in the chat, feel free to make yourselves known, but otherwise kick it back to you, Rachel.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Dr. Joseph Conway. I'm a physician here. I've been living here for 45 years. But I'd like to, I'll have you all, you can probably pick it up in the library if you want. There's a recent article, the December 7 of this year, in other words, a couple of weeks ago, in the New England Journal of Medicine. There's a very interesting, extensive, out of the Yale group about the slightest increases in water. It's somewhat related to climate change, but the slightest increase in water, how it will markedly increase the bacterial counts that we do deal with actually, but it will markedly increase the bacterial counts. It's a real big concern of these cables running over the aquifer. I mean, you bring these cables in other countries, et cetera, other locations. They're not going over aquifers that are vital to our drinking water. So, I mean, it's right here, science, you can read it yourself, which is actual science documentation. The second big concern I have also that people don't seem to talk about that much is our aquifer of our water, drinking water, goes out under Dowser's Beach, under the ocean. And people don't really realize that, but that's where the aquifer extends out there. And I'm very concerned about with this drilling that's going to be done, this fabulous horizontal drilling that only is done for a few hundred yards. They just take a trench for the rest of the cable all the way out. What is your preparation for when you pierce the aquifer with the horizontal drilling? What are you prepared to do for that? And how are you going to prevent and take care of the seawater entering our aquifer?
Yes, so this is another question we've gotten before that I believe Ken Fitzgerald has addressed in some prior meetings. So I don't know, Ken, if you want to give kind of an overview of what we've discussed at prior meetings on that point, on the aquifer and the size and where it extends to.
Yeah, the whole Cape Cod land area, of course, is part of the aquifer. We conducted an evaluation. We have a registered hydrogeologist, and the conclusion was that the area that you're talking about near the drilling for the horizontal directional drilling rather at the Dowses Beach area does not communicate with the public drinking supply, was the conclusion. So although there is aquifer down there, it does not communicate with where there are wells.
Yeah, that's a hope. That's a great hope that it doesn't communicate with the aquifer.
Well,
We have proof that there's no way that it could possibly collapse and drop into the aquifer. I mean, that is insanity.
the other point I'd like to make is this was an issue that was studied by the federal government as part of the environmental impact statement. That was done not by Avangrid, but by federal scientists, and they came to the exact same conclusion that Mr. Fitzgerald has just discussed.
that, study?
Yeah.
reported?
It was discussed in the public hearing on the environmental impact statement.
Phone
Yes,
hearings.
yes.
Yeah. Well, but how are you gonna prepare? What, if it does happen, what are you gonna do for us? How are you gonna fix it?
Ken, do you want to address that?
Well, certainly the handling of all waters during the construction work is something that is very closely monitored and will be controlled. You know, we're very mindful of the seawater issue.
How are you gonna control
What is the plan? Is there
it?
a
What's the
plan
plan for
in
when you
place?
break into the aquifer? How are you preventing the seawater from going in?
Just say if there isn't one.
Well, I think as Ken has discussed, what we have currently from registered hydrogeologists is that those two are not connected. And I think as well, something that might be helpful to think about too, and you know, we can look at some of these documents as well, perhaps for some examples as well, is the permitting that Vineyard Wind 1 project went through, which is a very similar method of drilling in a very similar area and has not had that issue.
The aquifer is not a balloon that gets punctured. It's a body of water. And what Ken and the expert for foam were saying was there's no hydrologic connection between the two. So the drilling,
Present, there could be.
you
When
know,
they start drilling above it,
the drilling is,
easily collapse into it.
no, the drilling is controlled.
Oh,
And
yeah, control.
yeah, no, it is controlled and
Never been a problem.
it's very precise. The drilling doesn't wander, you know, off of its trajectory.
But the cables move, just like they moved in Block Island, and they had to be
So
changed and redone, and they.
Block Islands come up a lot. They did not use horizontal directional drilling. They used a different technique. They dug trenches along the beach.
But they did surcharge everyone.
It's a different company and a different construction method than the one we're using.
Sorry, you had your hand raised.
Okay, so you mentioned, I'm sorry, so you mentioned, that you're doing the 110% containment because the town requested it. So my question would be, had the town not requested it, I believe your containment was it was only 100% in a past hearing that I listened in on, perhaps years ago.
I don't
This all
know,
started.
I don't know what the original design
So
was.
if the town overlooks, if somebody misses this little point in these other substations that you're building, are you going to do the minimum or are you only going to do what the town requests?
Well-
And then my other question would be, overlooking the environmental thing, what the impact is of the potential. Has Avangrid, have you personally, have any of these people personally who have been here on the Cape wandering these sites and looking, do any of you at any time stop and say, what is this substation going to do to the overall impact to this residential neighborhood? Do you think about our homes? Would you want it next to your home?
So
Would you want it next to your home? Would you buy a house next to one of these once you have built it?
all right, so let's start with that question. Then I'd like Ken to answer your other question about the containment and where it came up from and what the original design was. The substations we're talking about, especially for this project, is in a very remote area.
There is nothing remote on Cape
No.
Cod.
This is on the other side of Route 6. And if you go out there, there is one home who we addressed that homeowner there really are no other residences anywhere near that substation site. And
That's
the main,
insulting.
no, that's true, that's a fact. And we'll show you the maps, you'll see it yourself. It is not in a residential neighborhood. There are not residents, with the exception of one homeowner, that are close at all to that site. So I
So I
don't,
guess I have to show up to Pine Hill Road substation to ask you that question next, and then you give me the same answer?
well, there are a few residences there, but there's also buffering and.
It's the main exit when you get off of exit 6 to
Yeah.
come to Cape Cod, to come to Barnstable.
And it will
And
be,
our welcome to Barnstable
It-
is gonna be your giant substation.
well, I don't know, maybe you guys could talk about the visual buffering.
Yeah, we can pull up those graphics as well. We have them as some of the attachments in our permit filing. So we have visual renderings of what the view corridors will look like from multiple points on the road, multiple points on Route 6. For the substation, which I'm happy to send you, or even pull it out.
Question, Betsy?
Good.
Yeah.
Couple things. First of all, Ken,
Well, we were going to, you had another question though, remember? You wanted to know about what did we originally propose and how did it evolve? Didn't you ask that question?
About the containment.
Yeah. So why don't we answer that?
Okay.
So Ken,
Yes.
could you answer it? And if you know the back and forth on Vineyard, great. If you, but in addition to that, could you just describe what this containment mechanism actually is so people have all the facts about it?
Yeah, sure. I'll walk you through it. We were involved intimately with Vineyard and One as well. So we do know the history, and there was a lot of good technical discussions between the Vineyard Wind folks and the town. We had a series of meetings in town hall. So, generally speaking, the regulations and good engineering practice always recommend or mandate, if you will, that you design a containment for two criteria. One is the dielectric fluid volume, and then the other is precipitation. So the criteria that we came out of the gate with was 110% of the dielectric fluid volume. And as the design advanced and discussions with the town advanced, the town accepted that. So that was good. Then related to the precipitation event, we typically would have used a value that would have been based on I think what they call a 100-year storm, which I'm forgetting the numbers now, but it might have been, I don't know, 15 inches worth of rainwater. But we had the collaboration with the town, and the town's expert identified what they determined was the probable maximum participation event, which is a little bit above the industry standard, but we were fine with using it, and we did. And that standard has lasted the test of time. It's integral with the Park City Wind design, integral with Commonwealth Wind. But we actually did some upgrades to further enhance the protection to the aquifer. First of all, each one of the electrical components that contains the dielectric fluids will have its own containment. It's basically a bathtub. What it looks like is a pedestal where the electrical components, say a transformer, will sit. And then it's got a bathtub all around it. But what we did is we came up with the design that fitted the drain pipe that came out of each of those containments, which with these devices that contain what are called the amiber beads. For those of you who've heard me talk about this before, forgive me for being redundant. But what those beads do is they let water pass through it, but not oil. So on a normal day in a substation, if there's a rain event, rain will end up flowing into the containment and it goes out the drain piping. And I'll talk more about the drain system in a second. But in the unlikely event that there was any kind of seepage of dielectric fluid or leakage of dielectric fluid, the way these amiber beads work, they're a polymer, is they actually solidify when in contact with a hydrocarbon. So effectively what that does is it forms a plug. So if there is oil that flows on these beads, it basically seals itself from any additional fluid flowing through it. So that's one level of protection. So we have that in each and every one of the bathtubs. And by the way, each component gets its own containment. And so we have underground piping, or we've designed to have underground piping that will basically collect the individual drain pipes. And at the end of that drain system, where all of the individual legs come together as an additional measure of protection, we have an oil water separator. So it's some might call it belt and suspenders, but we're concerned about the aquifer. We added those additional features. And there's one more. Within each of the containment structures, we've fitted a level switch. And the way the system is designed to work is there should never be any kind of accumulation of fluid. So what these level switches do is they identify to the operators that monitor the substation 24/7 that there's an accumulation of a fluid inside that containment. Now, what it might mean if that level switch ever sends a signal is maybe some leaves have flowed in and have blocked the drain pipe. But what it does do is if for some reason, under the very unlikely scenario that there was an oil leak, the operators would be immediately alerted that there's an accumulation and they send somebody out to investigate. So it was a great collaboration with the town, and we on the developer side fitted some additional enhancements to further protect that aquifer. So the design I mentioned was used on Vineyard and 1, and it's slated for Park City and Commonwealth. That's how the design is set up.
Are each of those individual tank, like everybody has an oil tank in their yard, that has a double wall tank to contain it, correct? If every transformer, say it's got 100 gallons, it's got a 110-gallon tub of its own. But you made the comment that the drain lines go underground. So is the entire substation in a containment tub? So that the water, any spillage in one of these smaller individual tubs, can that then go directly into the ground, or is it then contained inside of a site-wide containment? And the other side of that is, if there's a fire, if we're told, let it burn out, will the heat generated from a fire like that melt through the tubs, melt through the lines, and then potentially crack the concrete, because you know concrete does not like heat, it will expand and crack, causing leaks, and then it'll go into the aquifer again?
No, those are great questions. I'll do my best to answer them in random order. If I miss one, please remind me. First of all, the drain piping should never see any kind of oil because the oil would have been blocked by the amibra beads. So because of that, there is no total site containment. Each of the components are individually contained, if you will, but there is no site-wide containment for everything. The design, you are correct, it is concrete. And these designs have been used, typical of any kind of power generation. These types of designs we've used at fossil plants, coal plants, oil plants, and they are designed for those conditions. We follow various standards, including NFPA standards, as well as IEEE standards for the selection of the design and selection of materials. So they are designed to withstand their normal and any postulated scenarios.
I know, Cliff, you had your hand raised, and then we can go online to the question that came in.
I'd like to ask Ken a couple questions.
Oh,
Will, this Ken,
yeah,
our engineer.
yeah.
Ken, is your engineering firm hydrologist? Do they have the ability to estimate where the soil would go in the event of a catastrophic spill? I'm gonna ask multiple questions, you can answer them. Your fluid that you're using to block the oil spill, is it fireproof? And in your designs that you have, as an engineer in this industry, you must be familiar with the transformer substations that have blown up in Colorado and Madison, New York, and around the world, basically. And all your designs for 110% containment, how effective would they be in the event of an explosion or a catastrophic fire? And we were told by the Eversource people that local fire departments have to stand down and basically step back while this project burns, and that specialists will have to come and do it, but the industry standard is to allow these projects to burn out because they're too high voltage to put any kind of, liquid firefighting equipment or anything like that on. So I guess my questions are, this 110%, does it anticipate a fire or an explosion? The gentleman here, I'm not sure, I believe it's Mr. Swenson possibly, asked you a specific question about whether or not your drain system is outside or external of this bathtub that design that you created. And if you're so far down the road on the design of this project, why haven't those plans been made public? All we're seeing is a block of land and little squares showing where the equipment is. And there hasn't been any type of working design plans available to the public or anything like that. Mr. Kimmel said that it was our engineering expert that helped design this project, but what I just heard from you was that you made recommendations and the town agreed to it. So it just, a lot of gray matter in the middle of that, but fire and explosion over aquifers, is your hydrologist capable of mapping that in a similar manner that BOEM forced the federal mapping of the oil spill trajectory maps?
All right, well, thank you for those comments. There was a lot there, so let me do the best I can in answering everything. First of all, a couple of clarifications. The containment design is 110% of the dielectric fluid volume plus 30 inches of rain. And that was based on input from the town of Barnstable that was adopted on Vineyard 1 and has been used henceforth. Everything was done in close collaboration with the town to ensure their concerns were satisfied. Now, regarding these transformer events that have occurred at various places throughout the world, they're very, very few and far between. And there are transformers, and then there are transformers. All right, I can't speak to those specific events that occurred, but what I can speak to is the care that is being used on this project with the selection of equipment and the substation design. Now, regarding the design for everything is in the public domain. And I could appreciate that these, the DEIR submittal and any submittal that Avangrid has made are very voluminous, but conceptual designs for all of the project are out in the public domain and they are available. There are substation drawings that exist. They're in the DEIR and they might have been submitted prior. On the substation drawings, oil volumes or dielectric fluid volumes are provided. So the notion that designs are being hidden with respect are not true. They're out there and they've been around for a while. So that's that. Now, regarding the events that have occurred in how we're working to prevent those things from happening, we're using state-of-the-art technologies and we're ensuring through all phases of the project a very high degree of quality. We're utilizing the latest industrial codes. Some of these transformers that might have let go, I saw your video in the hearing on Monday. I can't speak to the age or the pedigree of that or where it was or how it was designed, but we're using the current standards, which basically serve as a clearinghouse for the lessons learned and best practices of the industry. Those codes are updated periodically. The committee members, they recognize events, they evaluate events that happen in the industry, and they upgrade the codes to ensure those things don't happen. The design we're providing is very robust. We have a SCADA system, which is monitored 24/7 monitors the way the unit is performing, the transform units, all the electrical equipment to detect overloads or any other abnormalities. And if an abnormality is detected, they will shut things down in a matter of milliseconds. So that's a feature I'm not sure that these other projects that had issues experienced. We're designed for lightning strikes. There's lightning masts that will ground any kind of lightning strike to the grounding grid. We're designed for extreme weather, and we've already talked about that. All right, the client is invoking a robust QA/QC program. through all the work, implementing a very robust shop testing of all the equipment, field testing of all the equipment, and they're only buying components from quality vendors that have experience in this size range and are qualified with ISO 9001 programs. So we're doing a lot to prevent any types of issues from happening. This is going to be a state-of-the-art installation when it's done. These videos that show up on the internet every once in a while, we don't know the age, we don't know the pedigree. So all I can speak to is the care that the client is taking. Regarding your question about what our hydrogeologists can do and not do, I'll have to get back to you on that, sir. I don't know, but that is something we could certainly reply to.
Before we move to the next, I'm sorry, yes.
If we assume that everything that you've designed works perfectly, in the event that something gets overlooked and fails, so my question is, what financial protection do we have as town of Barnstable, everybody on the Cape, in the event of a fire explosion or environmental catastrophe? Who's gonna pay for that? Are we the new Palestine or are we the new Flint, Michigan? Who is there a bond posted? Who pays for the cleanup?
So
If
this-
it's even possible.
And I'll expand on your question too, because you asked me this before Ken got here and I didn't know
Correct,
the
that's
answer.
why I
So,
asked before.
yeah, so the full question he asked earlier too as well was looking at an early version of the Park City Wind HCA that had $1 million bond included in it, and then a more recent version that he'd seen did not have that included in it.
Right.
So he was asking for some clarification on that, and then also for the Commonwealth Wind project, what, if
What will
any?
happen?
Yep.
Okay, so, yes, first of all, the Park City HCA requires us, as do our lenders, as does the federal government, to have insurance to cover all of these risks. And the Park City HCA allows the town, requires us to name the town as a beneficiary if they ask for it. So first of all, there's insurance that covers all of these things, and we are required and will purchase it. Second,
What are the limits on that insurance?
I don't have the policies in front of me. I can get back to you on what the limits are, but you can understand, I think, that our lenders, and governmental entities are requiring insurance policies that will cover these risks. That's first of all. Second of all, if this project is successfully rebid and we are awarded a power purchase agreement, that is a 20-year power purchase agreement that locks in a guaranteed revenue stream that also provides sources of funding on an ongoing basis on top of the insurance. And third, we have not done a host community agreement with the town for the third project. If the town wants different forms of financial security, bonds, and things of that, we're open to negotiate those things for this upcoming project.
So you have a host agreement for one or two of these,
Two
but
of them.
not two, but not the third. So the town, apparently seems like the town is not being granted intervenor status. That happened, what, Wednesday? On Monday.
I just want to clear that up. That was for the Park City project.
Correct, so on the third
The third one, the siting board hearings haven't even started.
So on the third one, if the town decides we don't want to enter into a host agreement, it's dead in the water now, because I think what the public has learned probably since September, when all this started to come to light, that we don't want it. The third one could be killed just by saying, the town just saying we don't want it. No host agreement?
I'm sorry. The town has the right to sign and not sign a host community agreement, definitely. That's their choice.
So if the town, and you don't get the permission to relieve the protections of Article 97, and they don't vote for the legislature to change that, which they did in Craigville and Covo during COVID, and I disagreed with a tempered statement that they came late to the game to the town of Barnstable to object to this. If we didn't come late to the game, we were kept out of the game purposely by design. We're not informed at all of this project till it was already approved. No one knew about it. So point is, if you don't get your authorization to, and the protections are not lifted, what is your next step on that? You were gonna do what you did with Tepper and go right over everybody's head, and then she's gonna say it's in the public good, which is what you did the other day? So what is your plan?
We've been saying this all along. Our goal is to reach an agreement with the town where the benefits that we're providing are sufficient, that the town determines it's in the public interest to host the third project.
No, it's not in our interest.
That's your opinion,
we're
and you're fine to have.
What he's talking about was Article 97, protects the easements for Craigville. I think that's what she's talking about, Ken. You could just address that.
I'm sorry, the easements for
Article
Craigville?
97, that just haven't been signed off yet for Craigville, right? So I think that's what she's
It was
referring
already
to.
signed. They gave
No, the vote was
Steve,
given, but they haven't been signed off, so.
But they
Yeah,
signed
they,
approval.
and my understanding is the town council voted to sign the easements. The host community agreement for Craigville, for Park City has been signed.
Yeah.
And they voted, what, a month or two ago to defer signing them
Yeah,
until the siting board has ruled.
or you have new PPAs, one or the other, yeah.
Okay,
That was what was publicly announced.
yeah, I'd like to see the language of it, but,
Yeah.
the point is, at some point in the future, we're going to request the town to sign the easements.
And I think what Mrs. Conway is asking is, what if they don't sign? What-
Well, that's a legal question that I'm not prepared to answer.
I think before we take any else, Pat, are you able to I know we just have had this one online for a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So Sophie has a question here that she put in the chat. Sophie's question is, Mr. Kimmel said Avangrid does not have the right to land at industrial sites, as some have suggested. Do others? Who does have the right to land at those industrial sites? Happy to take that or defer to you or Ken. You can.
Pat, you're on. Why don't you take it?
Sure. So that's a great question. So there are a number, obviously, and a lot of folks who have lived in Massachusetts for a long time will know a lot of these locations. Folks often talk about the South Coast region. So, there's one obvious location that is planning to host wind cables, which is Brayton Point in the town of Somerset, former massive coal plant, a large commercial facility that juts out into the bay there in Somerset. So a company called South Coast Wind is planning to interconnect 1,200 megawatts of power there. And then a company called Ørsted has the second 1,200 megawatts position there. So that site is pretty spoken for. And there was a recent Falmouth Enterprise article that speculated from a selectman in Falmouth that South Coast Wind was actually trying to buy the full 2,400 megawatts at that facility. But that still has its challenges. To get to Brayton Point, you have to cross through Aquidneck Island in Rhode Island, the town of Portsmouth, which is what South Coast Wind is proposing. And anybody to get to Somerset, you have to, with offshore wind cables, you have to cross through that portion of Rhode Island land, which provides a lot of complications. Otherwise, the canal site is often brought up, and I think someone, if I recall correctly, may have brought it up tonight and said correctly that the company JIRA that owns now the canal plant in Sandwich, they have floated in the last year, taking wind power at that facility. And they made that more formalized over the summer when they petitioned the state to allow them to host offshore wind power when their peaker power plants, their oil burner and natural gas burner power plants are not being used. And that was rejected by the state because the state Department of Energy Resources, their argument, and the utility companies as well, said we only want offshore wind power that has the ability to be operational 365 days a year, and we don't want to have to turn off offshore wind turbines to turn on an oil plant. So that was rejected, and at least for now, that is closed. Always possible that comes back into the picture again, but for now, that door is closed. That also has some significant complications because of the planned Sagamore and Bourne Bridge projects, how you'd get there, via roads, approach roads on the Warren Highway, Scenic Highway, to the bridges, or going under the canal that are going to go through major construction is a big unknown to even get there. People bring up Pilgrim in Plymouth. I think that one's pretty obvious. They're an active federal decommissioning and moving spent nuclear fuel rods into a storage facility there. That one is not going to be, I think, even in the picture until that decommissioning process is sorted. And obviously, they're sitting on that big pool of water that has some nuclear material in it. That's obviously you've all seen in the news what's going to happen with that. So that site's not an option, and this has a similar problem as how do you get there when the roads approaching the bridges are all going to be changed and under construction, and you may or may not be able to put it under the canal. So that's a big question as well. People bring up New Bedford a lot. There's a couple complications with New Bedford. First, there's no substation there that's and a candidate to be upgraded in New Bedford or the surrounding towns of New Bedford that makes sense that can take much capacity. New Bedford Harbor also has it's a Superfund site, has PCBs in it, so you can't drill cables as you approach New Bedford Harbor and especially beyond the hurricane barrier. So that wouldn't be that's a big blockade. Our company does have a small queue position in Acushnet, Mass, which is an abutting town to New Bedford, but that's only for 400 megawatts, which is much less than what we need. And there's that substation is small and constrained by conservation land, so it can't be upgraded like the substation in West Barnstable. There's not a lot else out there, honestly. And, other companies, Ørsted is landing at Quonset Point in Rhode Island, which is a commercial site, makes some sense. They're using up that capacity there. Other companies like Equinor are looking at the Millstone nuclear power plant facility in Waterford, Connecticut, that abuts New London. They have the position there. Various other companies have the positions on Long Island. So it's not as you assume that there's a lot out there. People say, is there anything over by Mass Maritime and Wareham? No. So there's not a lot out there. And I think the history of this, the last thing I'll say is that the West Barnstable substation was not built long ago. It was built, I believe, between 2008, 2012. It's a pretty new substation that has a direct connect over the canal directly to the Carver switching station, which is one of the biggest sort of electrical facilities in the Eversource network in Massachusetts. This substation is a great candidate for this purpose. And, some might say that it partly was built for this purpose as well when the Cape Wind project was going on at the time. This is a relatively new substation that can be upgraded and expanded. There's not a lot else like that in Massachusetts, especially on the coastal parts of the state.
Larry, sorry, I know.
I have two questions, I think for Ken. First off, Ken, can you refrain from using jargon like QA, QC? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people really don't know what that is, and like you to explain that. And when you do that, talk about commissioning. But I think it would be better for all of us if we could get details, okay? And when you're talking about the containment system, the piping, the beads and everything, if we could, I know if I could see that on a detail, on a plan, and someone can walk me through that, I'd understand it better than just listening. So.
Or trying to find those drawings on.
So Larry, thank you, Larry, for the comment. And sorry for using acronyms. QA/QC is quality assurance, quality control. And I also use the word ISO 9000. What that is, it's basically it's an international standards organization recognized around the world, and it's a pedigree of a quality control program. So basically, most companies have quality control programs. The best companies tailor their quality control programs so they'll meet the ISO 9000 requirements. It's a extremely high degree of quality. Rachel, I have the drawings handy. I could share my screen if that wouldn't be out of line.
We can also get them to you.
Personally, I'd like to hold them in my hand.
Can we get the drawings
We're posting them on the website.
I think we can, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But the other thing, Ken, is what is your commissioning process? I mean, we do work at universities and it's very intensive. I mean, I'm sure your commissioning process there is, volumes.
Yeah, yes, the commissioning process, Larry, will be, I guess I could best paraphrase it as being a utility grade commissioning process. These are, these are highly engineered components, high performing components with a high degree of automation and a high degree of control. And so because of that, it's an extensive process to do the checkout, the startup, confirm that all the circuits are working as they need to. It's on par with what you would expect out of a utility. And that makes sense because we are interconnecting with the utility. Does that answer your question, Larry?
Yeah, I do have one more question, Doug. You mentioned the level switch. Where is that located? How low in the sump or whatever you want to call it? Is that, like just three inches off the ground? So if any bit of oil gets in there, the switch is actuated?
It's relatively low. We're a little ways away from actually setting it, but setting the location, but it would be low enough to pick up an accumulation of water, but we wouldn't want to set it so low that if you had like a really bad rain event like we had on Monday and Sunday night, that if there's a little bit of backup at the sump just because the water can't get down the drain quick enough, we wouldn't want to get like a spurious actuation, if you will. So that's a detail that'd work out, but it would be relatively low. I would say it's safe to say probably below the 25% height, if you will.
Ken, I'm seeing some confused faces about the phrase you just used. The asparagus.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we wouldn't want sorry about that, folks.
Yeah, no worries.
So we wouldn't want a false alarm. We wouldn't want a false alarm. And a false alarm would be if the rainwater couldn't get down the drain quick enough that if the water's backed up a little bit, like it can back up on a curb if the catch basins don't operate quick enough. We wouldn't want a false alarm. That makes sense.
Question that I had about, you mentioned the polymer beads, and you said that if they detected or if an alarm detects something, somebody will be sent out immediately to check on it. Who? Where is they're being sent from immediately? Boston?
Okay, for clarity, the Amibra beads, they don't alarm anything. What they do is they solidify and form a plug if they're exposed to oil. Rachel, maybe I'll let you handle where the operations staff is located.
Yeah, and I think Pat, maybe you could build you around the staffing at the station.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's Heather asking. So we'll likely have a mix of, we'll both have a contractor in place for that maintenance, is what's the case. The Vineyard Wind plan is still being finalized for that first project, but it'll be a mix of a contractor and then some full-time employees who are dedicated to that as well. So there'll be individuals who will have that responsibility, who will be located presumably somewhere in southeastern Massachusetts, either on the Cape or shortly over the bridge.
I just want to make sure it's clear from the record, the polymer doesn't need a human to make it.
No, I
It is a
understand, but
chemical
what I'm
interaction,
saying is,
it blocks the drain.
if the drain is now blocked,
What happens next?
and now whether the amount increases and whatever this alarm is gets alarmed, and it's the 4th of July on Cape Cod, and now he's saying it's not even Boston, it's somewhere in New England. So now somebody gets notified that they need to come to Cape Cod to check this out. What's the time response? What's your response time to get to that facility that has an alarm sounding?
It's quick, Heather, and I think Each project will have an emergency response plan with the relevant fire districts and with the town. And there's been a lot of those conversations, for example, going on right now with Vineyard Wind. So that'll all be spelt out project by project, communicated with local public safety officials within the town, fire and police, and also with the relevant state police barracks in Yarmouth. So it'll be clear whose responsibility that is. It'll all be spelled out in the emergency response plan so that there's no surprises. So that if there ever an issue called into any of the fire districts dispatches, that those officials know and have the plans on hand and know who to contact from the relevant company or individual.
Yep, you're gonna.
I'd like to move on to maybe another part of the aspect of, we're talking about the Dowses project.
I've got one very important question on this.
All right, go ahead.
Just real quick. Pat, if I understand you correctly, I've read in the newspaper, you're getting ready to energize Vineyard Wind based on 5 turbines, whatever you got built out there right now. How many gallons of oil are in that Mary Dunn Road, near the Independence Park substation that you haven't activated yet? And have you completed your emergency response plan on that substation yet? And when you're listing your items, are you gonna put the water departments on notice in case of a spill so they can shut down wells and tell people to stop drinking water? I mean, where is the emergency plan? You just got approval on Monday night and you haven't even provided that to the public yet.
Well, I think, Cliff, a lot of questions there, but third, obviously, we're going to have state-of-the-art containment provisions at each of these substations, as both Kens here have discussed in depth. So I think the plausibility of anything getting into the groundwater is next to nil, thanks to the hard work of Attorney McLaughlin, the town, and folks from our company to prevent anything like that from happening. But I'll be honest with you, Cliff, I don't know how many gallons of dielectric fluid for the Vineyard Wind substation. I don't work on the Vineyard Wind 1 project. I will certainly work with Ken, reach out to our colleagues at Vineyard Wind who do. And I know that there's been a lot of work ongoing, communication with public safety officials. I'm not sure of the exact status of the emergency response plan for that project. I just know it's been in the works. I don't know if it's finalized. I'll look into that. Happy to share that with you in follow up. And you had one more in terms of we were approved Monday night and we haven't disclosed what. I don't know where you're referencing there regarding the EFSB hearing for Park City on Monday.
The emergency response plan, which would have instructions on whether or not you're going to allow our local firefighters or advise them on how not to get killed if this thing catches on fire. And you're not required to provide it until 30 days before operation. You're supposed to be a good neighbor. Why aren't you disclosing it now in addition to filing opposition to us coming and intervening?
I'm confused. So you're talking about Vineyard Wind now or Park City?
I'm talking about both of them.
Well, Park City, you said 30 days before operation. We're not even close to 30 days before operation for
And
Park
you
City.
haven't disclosed anything. Don't you think you should give us a little more than 30 days
Chris.
notice on how we're gonna respond?
Cliff. Park City is years away from operation. It hasn't even been built yet.
Maybe you shouldn't get an approval if we don't see how you plan on stopping a massive fire or an intrusion into our water system.
Well, I think we provided answers to all of those questions.
Promises.
To piggyback on his questions, I see our water commissioner is here. I'm very concerned about the fragility of the aquifer and our drinking water and how much of this dielectric fluid can get into the drinking water and be poisonous. I mean, is 1 gallon bad or, and how far reaching would this be on the Cape? Like, would this go, west all the way to Falmouth? I mean, how big an area would this be and how much of a leak could cause a major problem where we could not drink the water?
Would you like to have our expert answer that question?
If you have an expert who.
He's right here.
Okay.
You can have them confirm that 1 gallon pollutes 5 million gallons of drinking water on a parts per million basis.
That's a little disturbing.
But you're assuming something that we've said over and over again. You have to show that this containment, this elaborate containment mechanism with belts and suspenders is going to fail for that state of affairs.
No, you have to plan for the smallest possible chance of it happening.
It's not your drinking water.
Okay, Ken, do you want to address the chance of a spill?
Well, and I don't know who this person is on the board. This is
And
one
where
of
it
my
would go?
first meetings. I just, that's.
Ken, do you want to just try to walk through what would, what the mechanism is to contain anything that would leak?
We're not asking for containment, we're asking if it is not contained, what is the minimal amount that could affect our drinking water
Thank
Okay.
you.
on Cape Cod?
All
How many
right,
gallons get contaminated by 1 gallon of dielectric oil?
so Ken, if you want to answer it, fine. If you don't have the answer, it's something we'll look at and get back to you on, but I don't know if we can answer the question the way you're framing it, so.
That's why the project shouldn't happen.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was muted. That's a very scientific question, and I couldn't comment on that, but what I tried to describe earlier is a very robust design. Ken's words are good, with belts and suspenders to make sure that these types of events don't occur. But in terms of, how many gallons of dielectric fluid would be harmful to the aquifer, we'd have to get back to you on that.
Can you?
I am very skeptical of the use of the phrase state-of-the-art technology. There's been a lot of news lately on foreign web intrusions into our utility systems. Now I know why there are evacuation signs off Cape Cod. Can you tell me how much of the actual wind tower components are being produced here in the United States?
Of the Vineyard Wind, which is the one being built,
Whichever one you want to talk about.
most of the components are being manufactured, the wind turbines, by General Electric, in a plant in France.
And I would say, just to pull back a little bit on that, this Vineyard Wind 1 is one of the first and South Fork 2 projects being built here in the United States. The industry to build these pieces doesn't exist here yet. And I think something that speaks to the future of what this industry could look like is our submarine cables and our onshore cables, which I've brought samples to meetings before. Folks may have remembered seeing them, but I can bring some to future meetings. Those are made currently by a company called Prysmian, which is based in Italy. And because of what you were saying, that map showing all those different leases, including ours, they're actually going to be converting a coal plant in Somerset to a factory. So those cables can be made here in the United States. So I would say a lot of pieces are not being made here in the United States because this industry is just getting started here in the United States. So we are really hopeful that this industry can also spur a lot of manufacturing here in the United States as well.
My last point. Does it bother you at all that Iberdrola, I'm going to say that tonight, a major financer of Iberdrola is the country of Qatar, which is been accused of financing Hamas, and it's pretty obvious they have. Does that have anything to do with this?
So I heard about this, recently. I don't think they are a major financer.
10%.
I think it's quite a bit less than that.
I read 10% pretty recently.
Yeah, but
8.69%.
what?
8.69% shareholder.
That's pretty significant.
Well, that's.
So that's good. So we're gonna be setting money, they're gonna make money off this project and wreak havoc around the rest of the world, but it's okay with us. That's fine.
Look, Avangrid is an American company. We are,
LLC.
hold on, we are owned.
Subsidiary, but I'm hearing Spanish companies, I'm hearing France building turbine, okay. Yep.
It is owned by Iberdrola.
Yep.
Iberdrola has a lot of investors and shareholders. You're right that Qatar is an investor. It's not, certainly not enough of an investor to control or direct the company's operations. So I guess, so I can't really speak to that. What I can say is, and I think this has gotten a little lost in the shuffle here. Iberdrola is also the world's leading builder of offshore wind turbines. They have the most capacity, they have the most experience with this. Avangrid is enhanced by the fact that we have people on our staff who have been in Europe building these wind farms, designing them, planning them. Their expertise greatly assists us in doing our job, which is to build these safely and successfully. So the benefits of that ownership are huge. And, you know, it's not our call as to who is gonna invest in Iberdrola. That's way above our pay grade, way above our ability to influence. And having that parent company actually really increases the chance that we can pull these projects off. And it's part of the reason why we're getting the Vineyard Wind 1 project built, because we have that giant clean energy company who is addressing the most pressing problem facing humanity, which is climate change.
We have a couple questions on Zoom, Pat. I don't know if you want to read those off.
That's the most
Yeah.
present. It's the two wars don't mean anything.
Yeah, that's right.
The other stuff that's going.
They do too, but long run, if we don't get the climate change problem under control,
Keep the board.
then
Yeah,
we're
and-
leaving
yeah,
the
having that-
world for our kids and grandkids that.
Having that meeting in Saudi Arabia, that's really impressive.
I'm not a fan of that at all.
I have a question.
We have a couple questions on Zoom and then we'll come back to the room.
Dr. Conway, I have a question also. He was in line.
Go ahead.
I'll just do a couple on Zoom if folks don't mind, and then we'll go back to the room. So someone anonymous attendee said, ask questions, but don't let anyone answer uninterrupted, make it make sense. So I think they're just talking about the format of the meeting. And then secondly, Sophie asked, who is handling your OT and IT security? So I would say in general, the security for these projects, there is federal laws and standards that these would be projects of national security concern. So the security of these substations, the whole offshore wind facilities are significant and involve various public safety agencies at the federal and state levels. I don't think that's something that gets publicly revealed, obviously for as is obvious, the security protections are kept confidential to maintain security. So, but the security provisions certainly are significant. And then we had Kevin Devine. You had raised your hand but put it down, so I'm assuming you no longer have a question. But or Kevin, you're back. And then so I'm going to go to Kevin Devine and then Bob Schulte. So Kevin, I'm going to bring you here. And Kevin, if you would like to speak, go ahead.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So my name's Kevin Devine. I'm with the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead Aquina, and I've been attending these meetings for the last probably 20 months with all the wind farm companies. So with questions about what products, if anything's being built in America and everything else, the answer is no. We're many years away from producing any of these products. Currently there's being a ship built right now that's, I think they said 3 years is what it's going to take to build a ship that can put these products out there, the wind turbines out in the ocean. With that, which, there's a lot of issues with all that going on right now too. Like the Jones Act is I speak with Vineyard Offshore and Vineyard Wind pretty routinely. So there's violations going on right now, and from what I'm hearing from a lot of folks, the transparency with this stuff is non-existent. And and I think that's what's frustrating a lot of people. So there's a lot of secrecy with a lot of this stuff, and I'm not sure. I get this whole thing. People talk about climate change, and that's a selling point. That's where the government's selling this stuff. That's not their concern. The bottom line, it comes down to money. A lot of people are making tons of money off of these products, and that's what it is. Like climate change is not the thing that people are focused on with this, and anybody can sit here until they're blue in the face and tell me different, and it's not. I know what the truth is. I've seen this stuff. Like I said, I'm dealing with these people pretty consistently, and they just make this. Again, there's a lot of questions being asked, and there's a lot of unknowns. I wish they would just go with Vineyard Wind see what takes place out of this stuff, get some real data and let us know like how this stuff operates before we put any other things out in the ocean. And talking about kids, like climate change, where you think it's going to affect the kids, we're leaving this soup sandwich for the kids. They say these turbines are going to last 30 years. We're leaving a mess for those guys to clean up. So I'll stop there and listen to see what else other people have to say.
Thank you for your comments, Kevin. Appreciate it. I'm now going to bring on Bob Schulte, who has his hands raised. Please, Bob, go ahead.
Sure. I just had a clarification, a factual clarification from Mr. Kimmel. Earlier you said tonight that this project is years away from being built. We've heard and asked about the questions about the equipment before. We've been told the contracts haven't been signed. Just a few minutes ago, you said with a degree of certainty, you told one of the members of the audience that the turbines were being built in France by GE.
No, wait. I was talking about the Vineyard Wind 1 project. I said that's where the turbines for that project are being built. I did not say that the turbines for this project, Commonwealth Wind, are coming from GE. We don't have a turbine.
I think,
selected.
Correct. I'll ask the member of the audience, but I think the question was regarding where the turbines for this project are going to be built. So if that was the incorrect question, if that was not the question, then I understand for Vineyard Wind, but I think the question was for Park City Wind, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, well, I have the same answer though. We haven't selected the turbine vendor for Park City Wind.
Or Commonwealth.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I'm gonna let this gentleman hasn't asked a question yet, so.
Hi, my name is Ray Goulet. I'm kind of new to these proceedings. I grew up here in Osterville, went to Osterville Elementary, and I come back and hardly recognize the place in a lot of ways. But anyway, I'll get to the point. Pat partially answered my question about security. I'd like a little more color on that as far as you got the wind turbines. I don't know how many square miles that takes up. Is the Coast Guard involved, the federal government? And bottom line is, who pays for that? Are you guys funding a massive security for all this infrastructure? We haven't even touched on that. We keep talking about these polymer beads. Some, politically motivated person shoots a missile or something at a substation. That kind of, no beads are going to stop that. What's protecting this massive infrastructure?
Yeah,
And who pays for it?
I can start, and then maybe Pat, you can add on some additional details about funding if you have it. So
What
I
does it
think,
look like to the community? Because it's not invisible. It's not going to be invisible. There's got to be some physicality to it. Coast Guard boats, cruising.
You talking about the wind farm or the
well,
substation?
so I was gonna say, there's
Both.
two pieces there, right?
Okay.
There's the onshore aspects, like the
what you see,
substation,
that
and the
protects
offshore.
it
Yeah,
Up 24 hours a day, 365 basis. And who's funding that? Taxpayers, ratepayers, both?
yep. So on the onshore section, there are measures that are taken at any electrical infrastructure around the country, right? So whether or not that substation is getting power from any source, there are certain security measures there. And that's part of our development process. And I know, like Pat said, I'm not sure how much of that is public as it's being developed, but I can say that at all of the permitting levels, especially at the federal permitting level, that's a big piece of it. And Coast Guard entities like that are involved. As far as the funding, that's not a piece I'm super familiar with. I don't know, Pat, if you have any more details on that one.
I don't know really much of anything about the offshore elements. We can certainly ask the relevant teams, corporate security team from Avangrid we'll ask for a briefing on that and see what we can find out and what we're allowed to share. In terms of the onshore, the substation at Chute Flying Hill Road for Park City Wind or on Oak Street for this project. I do know that, from what I understand of the Vineyard Wind process, that the FBI and Mass State Police, a lot of those agencies are consulted and part of the security planning and ongoing security monitoring. These substations will have large fences and cameras and gates and have in-person monitoring. The further details beyond that, I don't know. And I don't know if I'm ever going to have access to that information or that we'd be able to share publicly. But certainly there's a number of, be a secure site, that's for sure, with fencing and cameras. And people will not be able to stream it, wander in there.
But these are all incremental costs. What's your skin in the game?
Well, that's a good. Rachel, please.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I think those are, as, you know, we've been discussing tonight, these projects are in development. I think that's a built-in part of that development. But speaking to cost, like Pat said, I don't think that's something that either of us have specific information on right now, but we can try and get a brief.
I mean, we will have operation and maintenance centers for these facilities, both onshore and offshore. We will pay the full costs of those operations. and maintenance.
That's your choice.
Yeah.
Hector, yeah, you haven't asked a question yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I'd like to return to Swenson's question about financial protection, belts and suspenders. Talked a lot about that under the substations. So for the last month, and this is for Ken Kimmel, I've been trying to get from the town details about the insurance policy that Vineyard Wind has been required to supply to the town. I got one policy where the expiration date was, the amounts were $5 million and the expiration date was April of 2022. Then I got a second 2-page insurance document where the maximum liability for Vineyard Wind for environmental pollution control looks like was listed as $25 million. You know, Charlie McLaughlin's been busy lately, so I'm going to go back to him again. But can you direct us to somebody in the Vineyard Wind organization who could supply not only details of the insurance, but the actual policy itself? Is that something that?
Could we ask Nate Mayo to take your call and walk you through it?
Nate Mayo?
Yeah.
What's his role?
Well,
He's been with Vineyard for a long time. I'm not sure of his current job title, but he is a Cape native and has been in outreach, external affairs, development.
I'm surprised you don't know him, but okay.
Yeah.
I've heard the names, but I've not met him, because I haven't had much interaction with him. But I guess my follow-on question is, you talked about all the protection that will be provided to the town for not only Vineyard Wind, but you referenced Park City Wind and
Commonwealth.
And eventually Commonwealth. So, you know, you're an experienced lawyer. What do you think of, given the possibility, low possibility, but the possibility of leakage into the Cape Aquifer? Do you think $25 million does the trick?
I don't know if that is sufficient, honestly. But I also just want to be careful because sometimes I say things and then they take a life of their own. I'm not sure that you have the full, in fact, I doubt you have the full up-to-date binder of all the insurance. Let me just finish, let me finish, please. Let me finish, please. Let me finish. I doubt you were given the entire portfolio of insurance policies that Vineyard Wind has. So you asked me, is 25 million adequate? Off the top of my head, maybe not, but that doesn't mean that's the only insurance policy they have. There may be policies for a lot more than that. So I just don't know. I haven't seen those insurance
Okay,
policies.
so Nate Mayo is somebody to contact. And secondarily, you referenced the protections that the Vineyard Wind senior secured bank lenders have demanded. Do you happen to know if the credit agreement for that transaction, is that a public document?
I don't know, but here's what I do know about it. I think you or someone else asked me at one point generally, how will Vineyard Wind and how will these other projects insure against various risks?
Right.
And I went to our counsel.
Right.
And what I learned was during the closing process for Vineyard Wind 1, in order to get the loans, the lenders required very robust insurance policies.
Okay.
I don't know if they're public or not. We can find out. That's an easy question.
Right.
And then I observed that in the host community agreement, at least for Park City, and I believe this is true of Vineyard Wind 1, the town has a right to be named as a beneficiary of those policies.
By definition, I mean, because we would be the party that would be harmed, but,
well, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. I don't know.
I just want to make a quick note because I want to be.
On 7 o'clock to
Well-
allow these people to get their questions.
So I was just gonna say, I do want to flag that we've got 5 minutes left, and I know David says let us go a little bit late, but I just want to be respectful of the library's time. So Gary is next, and I will go check in with Davis downstairs and see if we can get an extra couple minutes. Another, thing I will say is, a lot of folks, I have a lot of your folks' emails who've asked for specific items and follow-up too, but what I don't always get, and this is on me, is your guys' emails at the end of the night as well. So a lot of folks I do have, but I have my cards at the back, with my email on it as well. And so, you know, Pat's been taking notes, I've been taking some notes as well, but what I would also really encourage folks to take my cards that are at the back. And we also have a sign-in sheet if folks are interested to sign up for emails from us with any updates. There.
We spent a lot of time tonight talking about the risk to the aquifer, which I personally think is the biggest risk here. Avangrid spent a lot of time discussing their robust plan to prevent something from happening. Many people don't understand the full concept of risk. Risk involves two components. One is the likelihood that an adverse event will occur, which is very important. You know, there's probably a 50% chance that I'll catch a common cold this winter, which is no big deal. But the other component is the magnitude of the consequence of the adverse event which occurs. And regardless of how robust Avangrid's project is in preventing this from happening, even if it's 1%, the magnitude of the consequence to the aquifer and to all of Cape Cod is so great and so severe that I don't care how robust your plan is. The consequence to Cape Cod will be so severe that it makes this project and all these projects unacceptable.
Here,
Here.
Jim Davis is good for another couple minutes.
David said we're all set. He said we can go 15, 20 minutes. You said what will happen is the lights will off, but they just turn back on.
Yeah, I think the switch is at the back. And
I
then.
just wanted to make one last point too on the climate change that came up. China and India are building a new coal-fired plant every other week.
Yep.
And a lot of what's happening here is we're supposed to be the leaders. We're supposed to pay for this stuff that's gonna take place. But they're not gonna let it affect their economies. Okay, so we're gonna be the leader. They keep cranking out like that. What's the use? You're shoveling against the tides.
So I'll, just because in my former position, I was a sort of a climate policy person, I'll just give you my answer. There's no right answer, and this isn't the company's answer. China and India are building and continue to build coal plants. That's gotta come to an end. But
Build a huge solar.
they're also, I was about to say that, they're also leading the way in solar, wind, nuclear, and other carbon-free alternatives too. So it's a mixed bag with both countries. Historically, the United States and Europe are the largest contributors to what's in the atmosphere now. So not a snapshot of right now, but going back. And so we have the technology and the ability to really make a big dent in this problem. It is a worldwide problem. Everyone's got to do their part. And we are fortunate to have a technology, offshore wind, that can be done at scale, can be done cleanly, can be done safely. And it is the policy of the Commonwealth and one that our company shares that we got to do that. And China and India also need to get their own house in order. You're absolutely right.
Except you're adding about 400,000 gallons of fossil fuel into our aquifer.
That's right.
Well,
That doesn't exist today.
we're not adding, this is so misleading and you know it. We're not adding it into the aquifer.
There is the
It
potential.
doesn't exist right now. It's a hotel, it's 28 acres of land.
It-
They're bringing.
You're talking about the
hundreds of
dielectric
thousands
fluid?
of gallons. That's correct.
Yeah, but it's not being released into the atmosphere.
Over the aquifer.
It's over the apple.
That doesn't mean it's causing.
Why would you do that? That's insane.
Folks,
It's inherently.
you have other substations on Cape Cod that have dielectric fluid that don't have anywhere near the level of protection.
These are
that
some
we're
of the biggest
proposing.
transformers in the country, once you power them up.
I also say we do have a couple more questions
Yeah,
online that I'd
let's
love to
get some
answer, knowing
questions
that.
from some other
Dr.
folks.
Conway's been trying to get a question.
Yes.
And I have a
Yeah,
follow-up.
no, absolutely, and then we'll head over to Zoom.
Well, to change the subject slightly from the science
You know.
Hold on,
whoever-
Dr. Conway, we got someone in line here on Zoom. Lori Murphy, go ahead. Lori, you can unmute and ask your question. Please go ahead.
My apologies. I don't have a question. I hit the hand by mistake. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Back to you, Rachel. No, thanks,
Doing a
Lori.
Great job.
I apologize.
One of the other reasons that the town is so opposed to this project is, and similar to what was just said, you know, and it's been said 100 times, it's, you know, even if you like the idea of wind power, it's in the wrong place. Not only is it in the wrong place to our beach and the, you know, the estuaries and, the fact that it also goes up the, Scott River and so on and so forth. What about bringing this through our town? We've all seen the disruption of the Commonwealth, project and, or the Vineyard project is, of the Vineyard project in our town. It's been absolutely horrendous. And now, the other reason we're not going to allow this to happen here is because of the route that you're proposing. To bring it up Guiano Avenue, one of our loveliest, avenues in town, to disrupt the entire village of Osterville, bringing it through there, then bringing it up, you know, through to Main Street. And I'd like, you know, both of you to come and at either about 4 o'clock, anywhere between 3 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or any time between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning. Drive by the 2 elementary schools and that street light, and that, right there where Craigville Southern Pizza is. You know, just a basic, simple question. How are the kids gonna get to school when they're ripping up that road? There's 2 very large elementary and middle schools right there on that road. I mean, how, and you expect the town to accept ripping up that road? How are the kids gonna get to school? There is no alternate route to those 2 schools. All right, then you're gonna, you know, so the route of what you're proposing is insane. And we're not gonna allow any more disruption to our town. And, you know, and we've seen it. We have proof of it with the first project. So, you know, you might as well pack up and go home, because we will lay out on the streets and we will lay out on the beach. And, before, you know, and you'll have to, you know, have the police pull us, take us away. And the police don't want it anyway, so they probably won't take us away. So, I mean, you're just wasting your time on this last project for sure. And also probably the park. We just don't want, okay, we don't want it.
Get the message?
Get it? I mean,
And on
how
Shoot
stupid
Line-
are you? I mean,
Hey, buddy,
we've
we're
told
not-
you 1,000 times.
we're not here to be insulted, so cut it out.
No, we are.
Cut it out.
The way you come here and put on these shows is insulting to the citizens of this village.
I have a question relating to the,
Construction, I'm happy to speak about the construction. It is-
Yeah,
I was just gonna say, it doesn't seem like you-
this is gonna end though very soon if it's gonna develop this kind of stuff.
But if you have another specific question, I'm happy to answer
no,
that
you
as
can
well.
answer his about,
Yeah, no, we are absolutely not saying our onshore construction is not going to be a disruption. You have all seen and experienced the disruption of Vineyard Wind 1. We are absolutely not here to say that that's not gonna be disruption. And we also understand the disruption from our current chosen route, both for the Park City Wind project and the Commonwealth Wind project. What I can say is I think that there is, for some folks, I know not for everyone, for some folks, I think there is a misconception that this construction will be taking place unilaterally across the entire route for the entire duration of construction, and that's not how our construction plan is slated. And I will also say, as far as the elementary schools, that is work that we will be doing with both police, fire. You know, it is our job to make sure that at any point during construction, if any sort of emergency were to happen at a nursing home, a private residence, an elementary school, that is, ambulances are able to get there, EMTs are able to get there, police are able to get there. That is part of our construction management plans that we'll be creating when the route is designed through construction.
Where is that plan and when are you gonna make it public?
The construction management plan, it's one that is under, I think it's in our next permit filing. That's where that one should be.
Kimmel, the Park City Wind start looking to go operational in 2 years, and the document only requires the public disbursement of that document 30 days prior to operation. So in other words, we may not see what you're talking about doing in our community for 2 years down the
These
road.
conversations are gonna take a really long time. It's a lot of planning.
So that's where my question comes in.
Sure.
Notifications about tonight.
Mhm.
Your website, the newspaper? Did you, is this, is what we're sitting in tonight, is this,
This was not advertised in the newspaper, no.
okay, so it's only on your website?
And through email and social and through a couple other email listservs as well.
So if you live in this precinct, in any of the precincts being affected, it directly affects you. You have made no attempt, because this has been going on now for several years, especially during COVID when meetings weren't taking place in person. So the only way to know that this is taking place, even out of common courtesy, you are not putting out any type of notification to residents, taxpayers in those precincts so that more people know about this and can attend these meetings.
So we've actually done a number of mailings as well that are direct to
I've
not
never received a mailing from you.
How many have you done on the West Barnstable substation up at the tower?
in West Barnstable.
Or Shoot Flying Hill Road.
The answer is none.
And Shoot Flying Hill Road, you will be digging past the public, on the road, past where the public beach is, which is within 50 feet of the water. And I can't cut down a tree in my yard within 100 feet of the water. But you guys are gonna be digging and putting all this in as you come by the water, and you're saying the town, your regulations, you're following state like.
No.
As was done for Cobbles Beach with Vineyard Wind 1, it's the
No,
same set of permits and
We went
procedures.
to the local Barnstable Conservation Commission for all of the work in wetlands for Park City and
It
Vineyard
was the
Wind.
bridge.
What?
It was the bridge.
No, there were public hearings on our application, and it covered any and all work within a wetland or within a buffer zone of a wetland, and there was a
Within
public.
100 feet, it was limited to the Centerville Bridge.
Yeah, it was.
You didn't even talk about the lake. You
They didn't
didn't
talk
look
about
at the well fields. You didn't.
All the work that was in the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, which is in and around wetlands, was subject to a public process. Anyone could attend and say whatever they wanted. I think a lot of you were there, and the Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions, which imposed a lot of additional conditions on the project. It was a very public process.
You did not disclose the wetlands of the cranberry bog that abuts the Park City Wind property. It's a direct abutter, and it is considered a wetland, and you didn't disclose it.
Not where I was talking about. I was talking about Shoot Flying Hill Road, Lake Walk, that area. I don't know if you've been up there, Ken.
No, of course I have, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that's out of the purview.
Well, that may be out of the purview, but the plans,
But that's the
were,
only part that they approved.
look,
the beach.
the, yes, but the
That's
the
only-
plans for the work were
But not by. the-
available. And also for the Cape Cod Commission, the entire project was shown to the Cape Cod Commission. There were number of public hearings, many of you participated in it. So there was robust public process.
We have a few more on, I just would love to get these folks on Zoom, we've been waiting.
I think we're actually good here, Rachel. Someone raised their hand, but they've now lowered it, so I don't believe they want to speak. I will see Scott. I think you wanted to speak, but I'm not sure if you still do. And I just put Sandy. I don't know if you want to say anything, Sandy, but Scott McLean, you had you put up your hand, but I'm not sure if either of you would like to say anything.
Yeah, I can talk. So I'm glad that the gentleman brought up traffic issues, because I've been looking at these projects for a long time, and anytime I research them, the environmental issues are, in my opinion, non-issues or almost non-issues. I've had to guess, what is really motivating people to be so upset about this project. And I think traffic may be the big thing. And in my opinion, as someone who lives in this town and drives around it all the time, it's tiny. And I love the way the Colville Beach parking lot looks. I love the way Colville Beach Road looks now that it's paved. These are small issues in my opinion. I think that most people in this town probably favor these projects. This is a vocal minority that's in the library tonight. And I laud the efforts of you folks, and I hope you keep it up.
Thanks, Scott. And then Sandy, I don't know if I just added you inadvertently or if you had raised your hand, but go ahead if you'd like to say anything.
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
You can. I actually, what Scott just said, I find not accurate. In all honesty, I think what you're seeing amongst the residents in the town of Barnstable, and it goes way back, it was because of the lack of transparency, the contracts done behind closed doors, even the Cape Cod Commission. It was not really advertised to the community. The community did not know about it. And for that gentleman to say that the majority of the people, they approve of this project, there's no way we would have gotten 700 people at the Barnstable High School in 10 days and another 700 people at the hearing for the Cape Reliability Project. Many people are still not aware of it. The town council, clearly you saw a change. People want to be heard. People want to be involved, and they're not involved. Patrick, you know, I've been on you about the route in Centerville, Park City Wind. There was some, I wouldn't say, I'm not sure how to kind of word it, but there was some changes done to that where there was a proposed route, an alternative route. And you know how the residents feel about that. So I think that gentleman, yes, traffic's an issue, but more and more people are feeling that they do not have a seat at the table. There's state and local guidelines that are being surpassed to push through these projects. And I think you would feel the same way if it was going on in your back door, in your neighborhood. You would feel exactly the same way. So that's what people are more upset about, is the lack of transparency, disclosure, and really just thank God our town has finally come around. But I mean, prior to that, we really had 3 minutes to speak to our town council, and that was it. So that's all I have to say. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks so much, Sandy. I'll turn it back to you, Rachel and Ken in the room. I think we're good on Zoom.
Any final questions?
Yes, I have
Can I ask
something.
one?
Well, I just want to follow through on what he was saying about conservation.
Yeah.
Let's not kid each other. The EFSB that you applied to, the town of Barnstable.
Which we're
didn't want you to go to
required to
EFSB.
do. We're
Yeah, you
required
guys
to
as the proponent went and filed an action with the Energy Facility Siting Board. That action that took place on Monday overrode over 14 variances here in the town of Barnstable. One was building a transformer in a residential neighborhood. Two was to be exempt from the aquifer protection zones that our town has on anybody here that they want to build a tree house, they have to deal with it. Three, the bonding issue. In your application that you overrode us in, you specifically said that it would take too long to estimate a bond. It would hold up construction. Mr. Kimmel just said you're 2 years out. You don't even have a contract right now for a power purchase agreement. You guys violated a contract with the state of Massachusetts. Then you walk in and pay $49 million penalty. How much is the new increase in electricity costs gonna be to us? But don't come here telling us that you were Mr. Nice Guys about working with the town and you worked with our local conservation. The local conservation was the only board you went in front of because you had to. And it only pertained to about 100, the landing at Craigville Beach and 100 feet of the Centerville Bridge tunneling under. You were able to avoid the well fields. You were able to avoid the Sole Source Aquifer Act, which is an EPA regulation. We've been identified by the EPA as a qualifying sole source aquifer. In addition to that, the Massachusetts DEP has a sole source aquifer regulation that's supposed to enforce the EPA's sole source aquifer protection. We have an underwater system here that's equivalent to the Quabbin Reservoir, which supplies Boston. You are putting hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil over that. You didn't come through our boards. Don't make like you're a good neighbor. I have a good question for Pat and Ken while you're in the room on tape, Pat, for selective memory. You don't have a host agreement right now with Commonwealth Wind.
True.
You're telling us you're all a good neighbor. The town of Barnstable asked to intervene on some very simple newly disclosed information concerning the wonderful design at the transformer substation, the PFAS you're gonna use to put the fires out.
Cliff,
Within
you know,
about a
you're
half an
saying
hour-
so many misleading things. I don't
Within
even
a
know.
half an hour, within a half an hour, you had you had a requested rejection or an objection to the town signing in as an intervener to protect our villages, our town. Within about a half an hour of the town of Barnstable filing that request for an intervention, your attorney responded and objected to that filing. Commonwealth Wind is coming around the corner. You didn't get away with it. You haven't gotten to that host agreement. The town is now aware of it. I'm asking you right now, do you plan on objecting to the town of Barnstable making intervener status as part of the host agreement a problem for you? Are you just gonna walk away from the host agreement when we go for that? Or are you gonna go run into the EFSB and go for a comprehensive override of our local protections?
All right, it's gonna take a minute to unpack.
That'd be a yes or no.
No, because there's so many things you said in that question that are wrong that I need to correct if you.
Okay.
So, first of all, we don't have a host community agreement with the town of Barnstable for the third project. That's correct. That's up to the town to decide whether they want one with us or not. We filed, as we're required to do, with the siting board for Park City Wind about 3 years ago. There were deadlines that the siting board, not us, put in to say what the timeline was for when you could intervene. This is not us, the town did not intervene in that proceeding. They came in at the very, late hour.
In response to your late hour information you disclosed.
No, there was no response to any late intervention.
Yes, it was. It even stated it in their filings.
They're the ones who tried to intervene in the proceeding at the very last.
Why
hour.
wouldn't you allow them? What are you afraid of?
Will you let me finish?
Sure.
What we said to the siting board was, we haven't had a lot of time to look at what they're raising, but they appear to be issues that are of the type that we talk about and work out with the town all the time. And we recommended that the siting board require us as a condition to meet and confer with the town, which we're going to do. And we're going to resolve those issues amicably at the table, not in a litigation setting, but around a table. And we will be scheduling those meetings with the town right away. And I suspect we'll be able to reach resolution on all of those issues.
You guys.
So we're not
agree
ignoring,
with-
we're not ignoring the town.
Yeah.
We want to talk to the town. We think the way to work out problems is not, to file a late petition and try to be heard on something that really started 3 years ago. It's to have dialogue, and that's
You've
what
been
we want to
withholding
do.
information for 3 years from the
I
public.
think just to
And
be
nothing.
respectful of the library's time, I think
We've
they're
been
kind of
withholding
question, and
nothing.
Mr.
You're
Swetson's
Cliff, you're
waiting.
making this up. You're making it up. We were withholding nothing.
I just to be respectful of the library's time, I want to take this last question and then we have to end for this evening.
May I ask a question that sort of, I think kind of gives an umbrella to all of his questions? I've just been wondering with all this transparency and this late in the game stuff and everything. Is there Mass General Law? Is there a regulation someplace that allows the governor and her self-appointed board of ESFB, right? To essentially ignore and override the town?
Is there a law? Yes, there is.
There is a law that says the state can take essentially eminent domain of the.
That's a little different. That's
A little
taking
different, but
some-
the same.
That's taking someone's property. They have that right too, but that's not what we're talking about here.
But taking the state coming in and saying, we are smarter than you, and we're gonna run this project through the Cape, whether you like it or not, taking the taxpayers, the ratepayers, out of the equation.
Well,
That seems a bit, dictatorial.
I hear you on that, and you have a point. I think the reason the law got passed is particularly, think about a transmission line that needs to go from one generating source, maybe through 20 towns to another load center.
Yep.
Imagine if, you have 19 of the 20 towns, but you can't build it because the one in the middle says no. And then there's no, let's just imagine for this hypothetical, there's no way to work it around. The point is, we live in an electric grid and all of us depend upon that electric grid. And so I think the reason when this law got passed was to say that one town doesn't have the ability to stop everyone else from getting electricity. That was the genesis of it. And I understand what you're saying. Massachusetts has a home rule tradition. We care, all of us care about that and honor that. But this is, when it comes to the electric grid, there's an exception, and that law was passed, I think, 30 or 40 years ago.
So when Yarmouth said, no, we're not gonna sign a host agreement. If Barnstable had said the same thing, said no, and you would have just kept kicking it down the road until you ended up down at the end of the Fall River at the old plant. down there.
Honestly, I wasn't here. I don't know what the decision was to move from Yarmouth to Barnstable for Vineyard Wind 1, so I don't have any background on that.
They said no.
I do think we do have to end tonight, just be respectful.
I
of
just wanted
Dave's
to
time, but-
point out that our state senator Seer has made no attempt to speak up on any of this. And I just think it needs to be pointed out because I don't know if, unfortunately, not everybody here is in the room. But Patrick and Rachel were both employees working with Senator Seer. And I just hope that their state connections are being tapped into to get these projects through agencies that you're using your past job with Senator Seer, who
You know,
doesn't seem to
No,
be speaking, who doesn't seem to be speaking up for his constituents, nor does Kip Diggs. And I think that's criminal, honestly. I really do.
I'm not gonna speak to my professional work history, but I grew up on the Cape and I worked for Senator Seer because I love the Cape. And I'm very proud to be working for this company. And that's all I'm gonna say on that. But thank you all for coming tonight. Again, my business cards are in the back. Again, a lot of folks, I don't have all your information, but you have mine. And so you can grab a card at the back and follow up. Just give me 1 second.